They didn't just laugh at you, they laughed at God, and they thought they'd get away with it. There comes a point when heaven no longer watches in silence. There comes a moment when mockery crosses a divine line. And for the narcissist who turned your faith into a punchline, that moment has finally arrived. They didn't just target your heart. They touched the sacred, and now the God they mocked is rising with fire in his eyes. This message isn't for everyone. It's for the weary soul who's been mocked, ridiculed, misunderstood, not just by a person, but by someone who looked you in the eye and treated your relationship with God as something foolish. This is for the believer who walked away from the narcissist, not with revenge, but with restraint, trusting God to handle what you could not. You didn't clap back, you knelt down, and now God is standing up on your behalf. They didn't just mock you, they mocked the presence of God in you. There are moments in life when the pain isn't just personal, it's spiritual. When the betrayal doesn't just cut your heart, it tries to strip away your identity. That's what it felt like, didn't it? When the narcissist turned on you, it wasn't just their words that hurt, it was the mockery that followed. The way they talked about your faith, the way they made fun of your prayers, the way they rolled their eyes every time you mentioned God. And the worst part? They did it not because you were wrong, but because you were right, because deep down they knew there was something about you they couldn't control, something they couldn't manipulate, couldn't twist, couldn't fake. You were anchored in a power they didn't understand, and it terrified them. You see, the narcissist wasn't just irritated by you. They were irritated by the light inside you, the peace you carried in chaos, the joy that didn't make sense, the fact that even when they abandoned you, you somehow stood tall, not by your own strength, but because you had someone greater holding you together. That's what they couldn't stand. Because a narcissist needs to be your center, and when they saw that Christ already was, they had to do what narcissists do best: destroy, belittle, and discredit. So what did they do? They mocked the very thing that gave you life. They called you weak for choosing forgiveness. They called you irrational for believing God would restore what was stolen. They said things like, "You think God's going to fix that mess?" Or, "You really think prayer is going to change anything?" And they didn't just say it once. They said it over and over, until you began to wonder if maybe they were right. That's the insidious nature of spiritual abuse. It makes you question the God who carried you through fire after fire, just because someone broken couldn't recognize his presence in you. But let me tell you something they didn't count on. They didn't know that God has a fierce, jealous love for his children. They didn't know that when someone touches a child of God with malicious intent, they awaken the protective fury of heaven. Because this wasn't just about you being rejected. This was about the living presence of God inside of you being mocked, dismissed, and spat on. And all throughout Scripture, from Pharaoh to Saul to Jezebel, God has never stayed silent when his name is dragged through the dirt by the arrogant. Never. He watched every smirk, every sarcastic comment, every lie they spread about your faith. He heard every whisper when they turned others against you. He saw when you cried in secret, not because you didn't believe in him, but because you did, and you couldn't understand why he hadn't stepped in yet. He saw you kneel beside your bed, night after night, asking, "God, do you see this? Do you hear what they're saying about you, through me?" Yes, he heard. And yes, he took it personally. Because you didn't just bear your own image, you carried his. You were marked, set apart. And though you were bruised, you never bowed. You kept the faith when others would have folded. You stayed kind when others would have grown cold. You clung to the cross when everything in you wanted to run. And heaven has recorded it all. Not one tear was wasted, not one insult went unnoticed, and not one mockery will go unaddressed. They thought they were shamming you, but they were shaking a holy altar. They thought they were mocking your weakness, but they were offending divine authority. And let me be absolutely clear. God will not be mocked, not by narcissists, not by manipulators, not by people who think their money, charm, or status places them above eternal truth. And now the shift begins. The silence of heaven has reached its end, and the same God they mocked through you, he's no longer watching. He's moving, not just to vindicate you, but to confront the very spirit that dared to speak against his name. That's why what's coming isn't just consequence, it's spiritual justice. The narcissist isn't just about to lose status, wealth, or image. They're about to be confronted by the God they claimed would never show up. And as for you, you won't have to lift a hand. You won't have to prove a thing, because your tears already testified. Your silence already screamed truth. And your faith, mocked though it was, just became the very weapon heaven is using to flip the entire story. They mocked the God in you. Now they're about to meet the God in you. Not the God of religion, not the God of theory, but the living, breathing, defending, judging God, whose patience may be long, but whose justice is always perfect. He will repay, he will restore, and he will remind every tongue that mocked him, "You touched my child. You touched me." They thought God would stay silent, but heaven has been watching in holy stillness. There's a kind of silence that's sacred. You see, the narcissist misread God's silence. They mistook it for absence. They saw no immediate lightning strike, no thunder from heaven, and assumed it meant nothing would ever come. That's how arrogance works. It assumes delay is denial. But those of us who walk with God, we know better. We know that when heaven is silent, it's not because God is indifferent, it's because he's preparing something holy. They lied, they slandered, they laughed, and when no fire fell from the sky, they assumed they were safe. They assumed your prayers weren't working, that your obedience was pointless. They confused God's mercy with his approval. But what they never realized is this: God doesn't always interrupt evil immediately. Sometimes he lets it run its course so that when he moves, no one can deny that it was him. The narcissist wasn't just mocking your pain. They were testing the patience of the Lord. Every insult they hurled was being recorded. Every twisted version of the truth they fed others was being documented in eternity. And every moment they lifted themselves up at your expense, they were building a case against themselves. You may have looked weak in the eyes of people. You may have seemed defeated. But heaven saw the truth. You were enduring, and God was watching. Have you ever cried out in the dark and asked, "God, why are you letting this happen?" Have you ever begged him to step in, to clear your name, to stop the slander, to shield you from the humiliation? And yet, all you heard in return was stillness. You weren't being ignored. You were being protected by a God who plays the long game. Because the Lord doesn't deal in drama, he deals in justice. And justice requires timing. Not your timing, his. So now, the hour is shifting. Heaven is no longer watching silently. It is rising to respond. The narcissist who thought they got away with it is about to learn that God sees all. He sees through the charm. He sees behind the fake smiles. He sees the manipulation, the lies, the betrayal, not just against you, but against his name. And what's more, he sees the pain you tried to hide. Yes, you, the one who walked away without revenge. The one who stayed silent when they threw dirt on your name. The one who kept showing love even after being discarded and mocked. You didn't choose the path of retaliation. You chose the path of the cross. And because you walked in humility, God is now walking in judgment. on your behalf. This is not just the end of their lies. It's the beginning of divine exposure. And when God exposes someone, He doesn't just pull the mask off. He reveals the soul beneath. That's why this will not be a temporary discomfort for them. This is a holy reckoning. What they sowed in cruelty, they will now reap in full. You don't need to worry about vindicating yourself anymore. Heaven has taken up your case. The court of heaven has rendered a verdict, and God has declared, "Touch not my anointed. Do my prophet no harm." Psalm 105:15. The one who mocked your faith will now witness your favor. The one who twisted your truth will now choke on their own deception. And the one they thought would stay silent, he's about to speak with power. So, don't lose hope now. Don't let their arrogance shake your confidence in the God who saves. Your tears were never in vain. Your prayers were never empty. They thought God would stay silent, but now He's about to roar like a lion. If this message speaks to you, I want you to write in the comments, "God saw it all, and He never forgot." Let it be your declaration. Let it be your cry of trust. Let it remind the enemy that heaven keeps record, and justice is already on its way. Years of punishment are coming, and it's just beginning. God doesn't rush justice, but when He moves, it lasts. For years, the narcissist operated with impunity. They built a life on manipulation and appearances. They rose in influence, deceiving others with their charm while abusing the hearts of those they secretly envied. And you, yes, you, were one of those hearts. You loved them honestly. You believed in them sincerely. You showed them mercy they didn't deserve, and grace they never appreciated, and in return they mocked your faith and treated your kindness. But now comes the turning of the tide, and this isn't a brief moment of discomfort for them. This isn't a slap on the wrist or a passing season of bad luck. No, this is years of divine correction, years of falling from the pedestal they placed themselves on, years of reaping what they sowed in silence, years of facing the very pain they inflicted on others but never believed would come back around. You see, there is something God will never overlook, the exploitation of the innocent by the proud. What they did to you wasn't just relational cruelty, it was spiritual defiance. They attacked someone walking in covenant. They scorned someone who bore the name of Christ. And in doing so, they didn't just cross you. They trespassed against God Himself. And now, the season of grace they squandered is closing. The rain they marked is turning to storm, and the years ahead of them are not marked by success, but by consequence. God isn't just correcting an individual. He is dismantling a system, a mindset that believed it could exalt itself above His authority. That's why this judgment is not quick. It is methodical, measured, inevitable. Because God isn't just trying to stop them. He's going to break them, not out of cruelty, but to confront the delusion that made them believe they were untouchable. They will begin to feel the unraveling, first slowly, then all at once. Doors that once opened easily will start to close inexplicably. Relationships they used to manipulate will turn cold. Finances they boasted about will slip through their hands. Even their health may begin to weaken. Not because of your prayers for revenge, but because of their own choices finally catching up with them. This is not about wishing harm. It's about recognizing what happens when someone continuously, defiantly, and mockingly touches what is sacred. And the most sobering part? God will allow them to live through it. He will not snatch them away in death before the consequences manifest. No. He will allow them to walk through the very wilderness they once laughed at you for surviving. They'll be forced to see how it feels to cry alone, to be misunderstood, to be called unstable, to be abandoned by the very people they used to control. And in that brokenness, they will finally see the weight of what they did, not just to you, but to God. This isn't temporary. It's generational, it's cyclical. The damage they did went deep. And now, the depth of their discipline must match. You waited in silence. Now they will wander in silence. You endured ridicule. Now they will taste rejection. You walked with God when no one else understood. Now they will walk in confusion, longing for clarity that won't come until they fall on their knees and acknowledge the one they mocked. This is not karma, this is not coincidence, this is justice. And it is written in heaven that the one who plants seeds of pride and cruelty will in time be forced to harvest the bitter fruit of regret. That time has come. The soil has turned. The reaping begins. And it will not end quickly. Because the years they spent trying to destroy your spirit are now returning to them, not as simple hardship, but as a divine process of humbling that only God can design, and no one, not even them, can stop what's been decreed. They humiliated you publicly. Now God will humble them openly. Humiliation is one of the cruelest weapons in the hands of a narcissist. They don't just want to hurt you, they want to destroy how others see you. They want to isolate you, distort your image, and leave you questioning your worth in front of an audience. And the most painful part, most people believed them. They spoke with such confidence, such authority, such false sincerity, that even people you trusted turned their backs. They smeared your name in rooms you weren't in. They told half-truths, dressed in just enough facts to sound believable. And while you stood in silence, grieving, praying, wondering why God didn't intervene, they were building a stage made entirely out of lies. But here's what they didn't see. While they were building that stage, God was measuring it. He wasn't just watching passively. He was allowing them to rise so He could bring them down in full view. Because God is a God of justice, yes, but He is also a God of order. And what was torn down in front of others will be rebuilt before witnesses. What was defamed in community will be defended in public. What was taken in secret will be returned in the open. This is the nature of restoration when God is involved. It does not happen in the shadows. It happens in the light. When the narcissist ridiculed your character, they were applauded. When you kept quiet, they called it guilt. When you refused to defend yourself, they said it was proof you were hiding something. But what you were really doing was surrendering the battle to the one who sees beyond appearances. You gave it to God. And while the world moved on, He kept record. Now, the hour of unveiling is coming, and it won't be gentle. The people who once nodded in agreement with their lies will begin to see cracks in the image. Their charm will begin to falter. Their manipulations will no longer work. And those same rooms where your name was slandered will become places of revelation. Conversations will change. Perceptions will shift. Not because you spoke up, but because God Himself has decided to uncover what was hidden. There is no escaping the hand of God when He begins to humble someone. And this time, it won't be a quiet humbling. It will be undeniable. They humiliated you openly. They needed everyone to see you as broken, lost, weak, and unstable. They needed an audience to validate their abuse, and in some seasons, it worked. You did look unstable. You were hurt. You were grieving. You were confused. But God wasn't. He knew exactly what was happening. He wasn't watching your downfall. He was watching your crucifixion, because crucifixions always come before resurrections, and resurrections always come in public view. This won't just be about their fall, it will be about your rise. But don't misunderstand, this isn't revenge. God isn't seeking vengeance, He's establishing truth. And truth doesn't whisper, it thunders. When he lifts you up, it will be unmistakable that it was him. No amount of damage control, public relations, or image repair will stop the exposure. No carefully curated persona will survive the weight of his judgment. And when he humbles, he leaves no doubt who is Lord. So yes, they will fall. Not to punish, but to confront, to reveal, to humble a heart that exalted itself against his spirit. They laughed at you. They weaponized perception. But now they are the ones who will be seen for who they really are. Their words will return void. Their influence will shrink. Their following will fade. And your silence, your patience, your prayers will echo with the vindication only God can write into a story. Because what man uses to humiliate, God uses to glorify. And the same crowd that watched you bleed will now watch you heal. While they're being broken, you are being built for glory. There's a sacred irony in how God works. While the narcissist was rising in pride, you were sinking in prayer. While they were polishing their image, you were on your knees, covered in unseen tears. While they were climbing ladders built on manipulation, you were walking through valleys where nobody applauded, nobody understood, and nobody stayed. And in that loneliness, where you thought you were abandoned, God was doing his deepest work. Because before God promotes someone publicly, he prepares them privately. And the truth is, as painful as their betrayal was, it forced you into a place where God finally had your full attention. Not because you were rebellious, but because you were exhausted. They broke something in you, something that no man could fix, something that no affirmation, no apology, and no reconciliation could ever reach. But where they broke, God began to build. Not quickly, not all at once, but brick by brick, tear by tear, word by word. He rebuilt your soul from the inside out. He didn't just heal you, he transformed you. He stripped away the need to be validated by people who never saw you. He severed the desire to beg for love that was only ever bait, and in that empty space where your identity used to be tangled in the opinions of others, he wrote a new name on your life: beloved, chosen, redeemed, restored. The narcissist thought your silence meant defeat, but it was actually the sound of God laying a foundation not made of ego or appearance, but of character, endurance, and holiness. They thought they broke you, but all they did was break the outer shell that was never truly you to begin with. You had to lose their version of you, so you could become his version of you. Now, while their life is beginning to crack and collapse because it was built on sand, you are being established on something eternal. You don't need applause to feel secure. You don't need revenge to feel restored. You don't even need them to admit they were wrong, because something has shifted inside of you. You've tasted a peace that no validation can offer. You've encountered a love that no narcissist could counterfeit. You've become unreachable to their control, not because you ran, but because you healed. And healing changed everything. Your voice sounds different now. Your presence carries weight. Your prayers are deeper. Your discernment is sharper. What once would have drawn you back into their chaos now repulses your spirit. What once made you question your worth now reminds you of how far you've come. You no longer look for closure in their confessions. You found closure in God's covering. This is why their downfall and your elevation are not the same story. They are being broken by truth. You are being rebuilt by grace. They are facing the consequences of arrogance. You are walking into the reward of obedience. And while they scramble to maintain the illusion, you are standing in the reality of restoration, a reality no lie can touch. You no longer have to prove anything. The fruit speaks for itself. The glow on your face, the steadiness in your steps, the wisdom in your silence. These are the marks of someone who has walked through fire and didn't come out bitter but blessed. Someone who chose surrender over spite. Someone who let God write the next chapter instead of trying to rewrite the last one. And here you are, not because of them, but in spite of them, standing, breathing, glowing, flourishing. Not perfect, but whole. Not famous, but favored. Not praised by man, but chosen by God. So let them talk, let them twist, let them fade. You're not watching their downfall anymore. You're not even watching your own recovery. Because something greater is unfolding. You're stepping into glory. Not a spotlight, not a platform, but a life that is so rooted in the presence of God that no storm, no slander, no narcissist can ever shake it again. You've been rebuilt, and you're no longer just surviving. You're finally becoming. This is the season of separation, and you're walking into freedom they'll never know. There comes a moment in every believer's journey when God no longer asks you to survive. He calls you to separate. It's a holy shift, subtle at first. You begin to lose your appetite for the chaos that once consumed you. You find yourself uninterested in proving a point, uninterested in who believes the narcissist's lies, uninterested in going back to explain what really happened, not because it no longer matters, but because you've outgrown the need to be understood by those who were never meant to walk with you into what's next. This is what holy separation feels like. It's not loud. It doesn't require an announcement. It happens deep within your spirit, that quiet, resolute awareness that you are no longer chained to the dysfunction that once defined your emotional landscape. The narcissist, in all their cunning, never expected this. They expected rage. They expected retaliation. They expected you to crumble or come crawling back. What they didn't expect was your release, and not just from them, but from the version of you that once needed them. You are no longer trying to heal in their presence. You are healing in God's. And that healing has led to something even more powerful, freedom. A freedom they will never understand, because their world is built on control, on domination, on performance. They only feel safe when they can manipulate the outcome, bend the narrative, keep others orbiting their ego. But you've stepped out of that orbit. You're no longer spinning around their approval or their recognition. Your identity no longer lives in their validation, and that's what separates you now, not just physically, but spiritually. This is a divine distinction. God is drawing a line, not out of cruelty, but protection. He's severing the soul ties that kept you emotionally entangled with someone who never had the capacity to love you righteously. And with every passing day, He's establishing your steps in places their presence cannot follow. That's why the doors are closing. That's why the old connections no longer feel life-giving. That's why even the memories are beginning to lose their grip. Because God isn't just rescuing you, He's relocating you. You're entering spaces their manipulation cannot reach. You're gaining access to peace they'll never comprehend. You're living in alignment with the truth they spent their entire life rejecting. And for the first time in a long time, you're breathing without fear. You're making decisions without the weight of guilt. You're hearing God's voice without their distortion in your ear. This is freedom, and it's sacred. It's not flashy, it's not perfect, but it's pure. Because freedom in Christ is not just about walking away from bondage. It's about walking into clarity, into authority, into purpose. And as you walk, you begin to see that everything you thought was breaking you was actually making you unbreakable. That the very relationship that almost destroyed you was the very wilderness where God refined you. You were separated, not because you were abandoned, but because you were being sanctified. Now, as they descend into the chaos of consequences, you are ascending into the stillness of healing. As they cling to illusions, you are stepping into authenticity, and the separation is no longer something you grieve,